My wife blamed malaria pills until a doctor's call, 6 photos and 6 donors exposed her hidden life.
My name is Grant, and until last spring, I thought I had the kind of marriage people quietly envied. My wife worked in international healthcare fundraising. She traveled often, spoke at conferences, and joined medical missions across the Pacific. Everyone admired her compassion. She had this polished confidence that made strangers trust her instantly. I admired it too. For 9 years, I believed every late-night phone call and every delayed flight had a reasonable explanation. Then she came home from Fiji looking like a ghost. The moment she stepped through the front door, I noticed something was wrong. Her skin looked pale and damp, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She dropped her suitcase beside the stairs and leaned against the wall like she could barely stand. "You okay?" I asked. "Just exhausted," she muttered. "Those malaria tablets destroyed my stomach." She forced a weak smile before heading straight for the shower. I remember standing there watching the bathroom light flicker beneath the door, feeling uneasy for reasons I couldn't explain. She'd returned from difficult trips before, but this felt different. She barely touched dinner that night. She kept checking her phone and flinching every time it buzzed. Around midnight, she rolled away from me in bed and whispered, "Don't touch me tonight, I feel awful." That sentence stayed with me. Over the next 3 days, things got stranger. She avoided eye contact. She locked herself in the guest bathroom whenever she took calls. Twice I walked into rooms and watched her hurriedly hide paperwork inside her bag. Then came the doctor's call. I was working from home that Thursday afternoon when her phone rang on the kitchen counter. She had gone upstairs to shower again. The caller ID displayed a local clinic. At first, I ignored it. Then it rang a second time, and a third. Something in my chest tightened. I answered. "Hello?" There was a pause. "There. This is the infectious disease department calling for your wife regarding her lab results." I almost hung up immediately, but then the nurse continued. "We need to confirm she has started the prescribed antibiotics." The STD panel came back positive, and delaying treatment could worsen symptoms. Everything around me went silent. I actually thought I'd misheard her. "I'm sorry," I said carefully. "What diagnosis?" The nurse hesitated. "You're not the patient?" "No," I answered slowly. "I'm her husband." Another silence followed. Then the nurse apologized quickly and ended the call. I stood frozen in the kitchen. My ears rang so loudly I could barely hear the water running upstairs. An STD, not malaria tablets, not exhaustion, an STD. I wanted to storm upstairs immediately. I wanted to drag the truth out of her right there. But something colder took over instead, a feeling I can only describe as survival instinct. I waited. When she came downstairs 30 minutes later, I studied her face carefully. "You feeling better?" I asked. "A little." "Doctor call earlier?" Her entire body stiffened. "For what?" I kept my voice calm. "Clinic called while you were showering." For one split second, pure panic flashed across her face. Then she recovered. "Oh," she said too quickly. "Routine follow-up from travel vaccines." I nodded slowly. That was the exact moment my marriage died. Because it wasn't just the cheating anymore. It was how naturally she lied. That night, while she slept, I opened her suitcase. I'd never invaded her privacy before, never checked her phone, never searched her belongings. But my instincts were screaming now. Inside the front compartment, beneath folded conference brochures, I found a black envelope labeled VIP Access. My hand started shaking as I opened it. Inside was a laminated pass for an exclusive donor retreat held at a luxury resort during her medical mission. Attached was a printed schedule full of cocktail receptions, private yacht dinners, and executive networking experiences. This wasn't some remote humanitarian camp. It was paradise for wealthy sponsors. Then I found the photograph. 6 men stood around her beside a beach bar, all smiling with expensive drinks in hand. She was wearing a white dress I had never seen before, pressed tightly against one of them, while another rested his hand on her waist. On the back, someone had written, "To our favorite doctor. See you next season." My stomach twisted so violently I nearly threw up. I kept digging, hotel receipts, spa reservations, a folded note with a villa number and the words, "Midnight, come alone." Every piece shattered another part of me. The woman I defended for years had apparently been living an entirely different life whenever she traveled. But the final blow came from her iPad. She'd left it charging in the living room, and she forgot to log out. I opened her messages expecting maybe one affair. What I found was a marketplace, different men, different cities, different trips, executives, donors, physicians, investors. Some messages were flirtatious. Others were explicit enough to make my hands numb. One conversation mentioned rotating favorites during overseas events. Another joked about husbands being easier to manage than customs officers. I sat there until dawn reading enough betrayal to poison an entire lifetime. At 6 a.m., she walked into the kitchen wearing pajamas and froze when she saw me awake. "You didn't sleep?" I looked at her for a long moment. Then I slid the photograph across the counter. All the color vanished from her face. "Grant?" "The clinic called," I interrupted quietly. Her breathing stopped. I'd never seen fear hit someone that fast. "I can explain—" "No," I said, "you can't." Tears immediately filled her eyes. "It wasn't what you think." I actually laughed. There's something horrifying about hearing cliches in real life. They sound even dumber outside movies. "You brought home a disease," I said calmly. "I think that covers exactly what I think." She collapsed into a chair sobbing, but even then part of me noticed something strange. She wasn't grieving our marriage. She was terrified of consequences. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "It only happened during trips. It didn't mean anything." That sentence changed my anger into ice, only during trips, as if geographic cheating somehow counted less. I stood up and walked upstairs without another word. "Where are you going?" she cried. "To start fixing my life." For the next 8 hours, while she followed me through the house, begging, apologizing, and blaming stress, I emptied every trace of myself from our bedroom. Clothes, shoes, watches, photographs. By evening, my side of the closet looked abandoned. That's when the process server arrived. She opened the front door expecting food delivery. Instead, a man handed her a thick envelope. I'll never forget the sound she made when she saw the divorce papers. It wasn't sadness, it was shock, real shock, like she genuinely believed I'd forgive her eventually. "Please don't do this," she whispered, clutching the papers with trembling hands. I stared at her across the living room. "You spent years treating loyalty like a joke," I said. "Now you get to live with the punchline." Then I grabbed my last suitcase and walked out the door. Behind me, I heard her collapse onto the floor crying, but I never turned around. I moved into a furnished apartment across town that night. The place smelled like fresh paint and old carpet glue, but it was quiet, and quiet was all I wanted. I turned off my phone, poured cheap whiskey into a plastic cup, and sat on the floor staring at the wall until sunrise. The next morning, reality hit harder. I scheduled every medical test my doctor recommended. Sitting inside that clinic waiting room felt humiliating. I kept wondering how many lies she told while kissing me goodbye before those missions. Every memory from the last few years suddenly looked contaminated. While waiting for results, I contacted an attorney recommended by an old coworker. The lawyer listened carefully, flipping through the evidence I'd printed from her messages and travel records. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "She's going to fight hard once she realizes you're serious," he warned. "She already knows I'm serious." He gave me a grim look. "No, right now she thinks you're emotional. Once financial disclosure begins, she'll panic." He was right. 3 days later, my phone exploded with messages. At first, they sounded remorseful. "Please talk to me. I made terrible choices. We can fix this." Then the tone shifted. "You're overreacting. You invaded my privacy. You're destroying our marriage over mistakes." That last message almost impressed me. Apparently, multiple affairs and a disease counted as mistakes now. I ignored everything. Then her mother called. Not to apologize, not to ask how I was doing, to protect her daughter. She said those men pressured her during fundraising events, her mother insisted. "You know how vulnerable travel can make people." I nearly laughed into the phone. She seemed pretty comfortable in the yacht photos. Silence. Then came the real reason for the call. She's terrified everyone will find out. There it was, not heartbreak, not guilt, reputation. I ended the call immediately. A week later, my test results came back clean. I sat in my truck outside the clinic, gripping the steering wheel, while relief flooded through me so hard it almost hurt. For days, I'd imagined my entire future collapsing because of her recklessness. That afternoon, I finally answered one of her calls. She sounded exhausted. "Can we meet?" "Why?" "Because 9 years should deserve one conversation." Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. The moment she walked in, I barely recognized her. Her eyes looked hollow, and her confident posture was gone. She sat across from me carefully. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "You booked private villas," I replied. "That takes planning." Tears formed instantly. It started small. That sentence irritated me more than shouting would have. Affairs never start small. They start with permission. She explained how donor events blurred professional boundaries. Wealthy sponsors bought expensive gifts, invited her to exclusive dinners, offered upgrades, attention, excitement. She said the admiration became addictive. Then came the confession that finally destroyed any remaining sympathy. There were others before this trip, she admitted quietly. I stared at her without blinking. How many? She looked down at the table. That bad, huh? Her silence answered for her. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered something that still disgusts me. I thought I could separate those experiences from our marriage. Like infidelity was a business trip expense she could file away afterward. I pushed my coffee aside and stood. Grant, please, she begged. I know I failed you. No, I said calmly. You studied me. She frowned weakly. You learned exactly how loyal I was, I continued. You counted on it protecting you from consequences. Her face crumpled because she knew it was true. Before leaving, I placed an envelope on the table. Inside were copies of the photographs, receipts, and messages. What is this? She asked nervously. Insurance. Her expression changed instantly. You wouldn't. I haven't sent them anywhere, I replied. But if you drag this divorce into a circus, I stop being generous. For the first time since everything exploded, she looked genuinely afraid of me. Not physically, strategically. I walked out before she could answer. The divorce process moved quickly after that meeting. Suddenly, she became cooperative. Assets were divided without arguments. She signed paperwork quietly. Her attorney stopped making aggressive demands. Fear can accomplish what love never will. Months passed. Friends slowly learned pieces of the story. Most reacted exactly how I expected. Disbelief first, then outrage. Several admitted they always thought her trips looked suspicious, but felt uncomfortable saying anything. One mutual friend finally confessed he'd seen her dancing intimately with a donor at a charity gala the previous year. He assumed I already knew. That part hurt almost as much as the betrayal itself. People had witnessed cracks in my marriage while I stood there blind. The final hearing lasted less than 20 minutes. Afterward, she followed me into the courthouse parking lot. Rain hammered the pavement while she stood there clutching her coat tightly around herself. I did love you, she said softly. I looked at her one last time. Maybe she believed that. Maybe in her own damaged way she did. But love without loyalty is just convenience wearing expensive perfume. I hope the donors were worth it, I said. Then I got into my truck and drove away without checking the rearview mirror again.
She chased luxury behind my back. I left her with divorce papers and the ruins of her life.